Quran. The designer of the Ma'afan is God. That's the analogy.
But all the buildings, all the domes, they're based on mathematics.
Yes.
Which comes on the proportions of the planets to each other and to the moon cycle.
But I ask you this question.
Like you see the moon in the sky, it's the same size as the sun.
It aligns as well.
And the movement of the nodes and how you get eclipses, the 18.618 year cycle, all this mathematics is beautiful, and it's what the temples are based on. Before they had stone circles, and the movements of the planets, and the sun and the moon, you could see the backdrop of the sky, and then they started codifying this within buildings that would close for some reason, for whatever reason, and they started using the pillars instead of the stones, by which you could count the cycles of the node cycles and of the Jupiter cycle and the Venus cycle. There's all there within the buildings. The squaring of the circle, where they worked out the proportion, just of the circumference of the Earth being 11. If you put a square on that and pull that out, you get a diameter of 14. And you put a moon on it, on that outer circle as the centre of the circle. So you've got that. Actually identifies the diameter of the moon and the diameter of the Earth that's been worked out, these things, and that's how they created the domes and the equal area of 33 years compared to the 18.618 as a radius. It defies belief that all this coincidence between the outer planets and the Earth and the moon. Like for example, if you have a full moon at spring equinox, 19 years later you'll have a full moon at spring equinox.
So Allah talks about the stars and the heavens as a sign of Him in terms of being the creator, talks about it as being used for navigation, as used for timekeeping. That's one of the reasons why God created those heavens, to benefit mankind. It talks about when we're on the ocean on ships or on land, for example, how we use the stars in terms of navigation. Islamically, we use the lunar calendar. I'm not sure if you're aware or not. We use the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar. There are things in and
you've got the star and the Venus within the moon as well, isn't it?
The Quran, no. The only time Quran I think mentions Venus or Jupiter. I think it's Jupiter. Kawkab, is in relation to Abraham and his people when they were worshipping three gods, the sun, the moon and Jupiter. That's when it mentions Jupiter specifically, in terms of their paganism and worshipping the created rather than worshipping the creator. But generally speaking, yes, Allah talks about the stars and the moon and whatnot in terms of the purpose, how it benefits man, for sure. And I'm going to agree with you. The ancients were very sophisticated, and more so than some people actually believe. Very sophisticated.
They were travelling and navigating. There's more and more proof to show that people 5,000 BC and even further back, you're probably aware of Göbekli.
I am.
In Turkey.
What's that, 13,000, 11,000?
9,000 BC.
So 9, 10, 11,000.
Just after the Ice Age.
And they were hunter-gatherers. They weren't actually settled.
They had symbols, quite a language, a written language carved in the pillars. I've got a friend who's just come back from there. So they had what they reckon was a calendar at that time.
And it says they were hunter-gatherers. Because the archaeological spiel was, not until mankind settled and started domesticating animals and farming, that they had then time to develop religion. In terms of building civilization. Okay, but it's thought that the builders of Göbekli Tepe are actually hunter-gatherers. And if I'm right, only about literally 4% of it has been excavated. There's more below, and a lot of it was covered on purpose, buried on purpose, they say. Now, but this is the thing, with monotheism, you can't have pictures or idols of your God. Not allowed to have it. Now with them, Göbekli Tepe, in terms of those monolithic stones and the carvings in it and the fox and this and that, and to me that looks a bit paganism. It's a bit pagan.
They thought it was like a language, in the same way that the Chinese, they use
pictograms, and the Egyptians as well originally.
I think that the bird, the
hieroglyphs
is still not known exactly.
Okay. So you're saying it could be a written form of text,
maybe,
which is like a pictograph type thing, which then maybe evolved.
I mean, it's interesting. We're living at a time when a lot of new discoveries are being made, as a result of lost texts being found and translated. A lot of study last century by engineers of stone circles and seeing exactly what they were doing, rather than thinking, it was some primitive kind of thing. No, it was a very mathematical-based thing that they were doing that provided, some of the Pythagorean triangles. There were certain things that they were.
Do you know what they found recently last year on that? What's the term? A mathematical formula. They said Pythagoras kind of like produced it.
Because it wasn't. The story is he went out to Egypt, wasn't it?
No, regardless, they found it in the cuneiform tablet going back to Sumer.
But that's what I mean.
So it predates it by 1,000 years.
The king of Samos had an alliance with the Egyptians because it was at time around 500-600 BC when the Egyptians needed alliances. And the story is Pythagoras
got it from there
and became an initiate in one of the pyramids, with the temple holders.
Right.
The knowledge came from them, not from him.
Well, the interesting thing is they found a cuneiform tablet with that formula, and the reason why they had that formula, it was something, I don't know if it was inheritance or something, but it was about distributing land, sections of pieces of land. So they now predated it to the if it's Babylonians, Neo-Babylonians, Akkadians, I don't know, but somewhere in ancient Iraq. I think the Babylonians. But the point is this, the Egyptians had a man god and worshipped a lot of gods. Okay, the Greeks as well had their pantheon of gods. The Babylonians and whatnot had their pantheon of gods. The Romans, the Greeks. You want to go to what's called, Central and South America, for example. They had the same thing. But what we're all about is one God.
Well, you're saying,
one God.
When you're saying about the planets, the latest theory is that when Jupiter's going around on its orbit, it's not so much the planet itself, like the object. It's actually the whole area of its orbit which has a certain frequency.
Right.
So it's not the object anyway that is just the fact that it's collected and represents in some way the energy of that orbital sphere around the sun.
Raihan, I want to ask you a question. When you die, what do you think happens to you? It's a profound question, isn't it?
Go to a better place. Go to a better place.
Like what do you think?
Well, for me, like I said, the simple things bring joy: sharing food, sharing music.
No, but what happens to you when you die?
Yeah, to a place where there's more. I guess it's based on a feeling, isn't it? Of feeling good. Getting good only comes from the word God, anyway, doesn't it? It's the same root. So getting closer
Germanic
to God.
It's Germanic. God,
getting closer to God.
How do we know what God? How? Like a deist type situation, are we just meant to go with our mood, what we feel, our own internal inclination, or does God actually play an active role, active part in guiding us?
Yeah, I think it plays an active part. Yeah, I believe so.
In terms of like predestination, or is there an avenue of communication between us and God, or is he like literally? Are we on strings? Are we on strings, or is it through? Because we believe in prophets and messengers. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can go with that.
Were you Christian before?
No.
Nothing. Do you have a thing about scripture? What's your thoughts on scripture?
I think the thing is, neither of my parents went to church.
Okay.
My mum thought to send me to a Sunday school, but my dad wasn't very happy about it. I think that I remember my dad would always say, go to any place on the earth, any trouble spot, and you'll find
Religion.
a cleric. Yeah. I think that was his attitude. And my mum had, she did find something in the Christian church when she was 16 to 18, but then she was disillusioned for whatever reason.
Do you think that affected you somehow? I guess so.
Well, we never went to church except from school. Yeah. But I think that I've got to go now.
Okay, Raven.
And I look forward to Islam, the leaders of Islam, or what would you say, the voices of Islam, bringing forth that green message, because I think that the young would also appreciate it.
I agree. I think as a collective, as Muslims and as non-Muslims, we need to look after the earth.
Yeah.
I sincerely believe that, because we're seeing the effects of it now in terms of climate change, and it's either too hot or too cold, and floods and all sorts happening.
Yeah.
And we've got a duty and a responsibility to do much better. And by default, we should put more pressure on governments, and not only that, change our own behaviours.
Yeah.
We've got to change our. If I may, Raven, can I gift you this Quran in English?
Oh, thank you very much.
I think Madam has one already, yeah?
Thank you very
Awesome.
much. Very interesting conversation.
Likewise, thank you so much for your time.
Blessings. Yeah, really
And we're always
appreciate
here or in there on
it.
Sundays.
Yeah, nice
I'm going
one.
to tell you, I know you probably don't know, my parents are sort of, I was brought up Christian
Okay.
in the church, but my father didn't believe in the church. And I believed basically myself in the truth of Christ, of love, of his message of love, and I think it's been corrupted by the church to control a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
And take control of lots of parts of the planet, and to put other people down.
Yeah.
I sort of follow Buddhism. I think that we are reborn until we learn our lessons.
Okay.
So this will be very interesting.
It is.
Thank you very much.
And if we meet again, we continue the conversation. Awesome. Likewise. You're welcome. Very polite people.
Very polite.
Good
Good discussion, alhamdulillah.
Amen.